Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started here. Take a seat. Well, thank you all for coming to the session, Pets, Not Your Parents, Identification Technology. When I came up with this title, I was kind of like, I thought it was just catchy and kind of funny, made me chuckle a little bit. And I realized that pets are also not my identification technology as much as I am firmly in middle-agedness. So let's get going. So I am Zach Martin. I'm a senior policy advisor at Venable. Now Venable's a law firm, but I'm not a lawyer, neither is Jamie. So nothing we say here today should be considered legal advice. I've been with the firm for 2.5 years. Prior to that, I was at Deloitte, supporting public and private sector clients on cybersecurity and digital identity needs. And actually, way before then, I was a journalist in the market, having covered cybersecurity and digital identity for far longer than I care to admit publicly. And Jamie?
Hi, I'm Jamie Danker. I'm a senior director at Venable. Been with the firm about 3 years. I focus primarily on privacy. About 20 years of cybersecurity and privacy experience, 15 years in U.S. Civil Service. So I started off as an auditor at the Government Accountability Office, and then spent about 10 years at the Department of Homeland Security in various privacy roles. And during that time, worked a lot with the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I'm one of the co-authors of the privacy requirements and considerations for the digital identity guidelines, and also supported the NIST privacy framework, which we're going to talk about a little bit today.
So we can't have a presentation called Pets without actually showing some pets. So these are just real quick, some of the pets on, so we have 23 people working on the cyber team at Venable. And so these are a combination, some of, not even all the pets that we have. And just throughout, Coco is Jamie's Labradoodle. And then in the middle, the older looking pug dachshund mix is Matilda, my 14-year-old dog. So these are your parents' identification technologies, and they're also the current identification technologies: driver's license, passports, birth certificates. What's the most prominent thing about these documents when you look at them? Just somebody yell out, what do you see? What do you think? When you look at these documents, what do you get? You also see everybody's information is in plain view for everybody to see at any point in time. But even like you're buying a six-pack, you're going to buy a bar, you're going to get into a bar, and you have to show your ID. Why does a bouncer need to know your address, your height, your weight? They don't. So privacy-enhancing technologies are something that help with data minimization. They are technologies that help protect individuals' privacy.
And so I think we can't really waste an opportunity to talk about privacy risks. When I talk about privacy risks, I'm talking about risks to the individual. They can be tangible risks that result in economic loss. They can be sort of intangible. Embarrassment could be one of them. And then these individual risks then accrue to the organization, and they can result in things like fines, customer abandonment, all kinds of bad things. And so, privacy risks exist in both the paper and the digital world. So you'll see, the risks on the paper side are not necessarily unique. So, because the privacy risks exist both in the use of paper credentials and digital credentials, they're shared sometimes, but they manifest in different ways and to different degrees. So, as Zach was showing, you have a lot of over-disclosure problems when it comes to the paper records. There's identity theft, loss of confidentiality, all those fun things. And then when you go to the digital world, you still have some of those same risks, like over-collection. And this often can happen in the identity proofing process when the proofing entity is requesting a lot of sensitive information to proof your identity. And so you got to think about kind of retention schedules and things like that. Then there's the collection of that information. Once you collect it, there are a lot of other risks like use for unrelated purposes. You still have loss of confidentiality as a potential risk in the digital world. And then tracking and profiling is highlighted in red because when it comes to digital identity, that is the number one concern of any implementation, especially when you're talking about consumer-facing implementations. That's what's on everybody's mind. So, privacy-enhancing technologies, what are they? What we have up here is, this is the United States government, it's called the National Strategy to Advance Privacy-Preserving Data Sharing and Analytics. And this talks about privacy-enhancing technologies. It's not actually defined because there's really no universally accepted definition. This report defines pets as tools, techniques, practices designed to protect individuals' privacy, and they achieve this by safeguarding personal data during storage, processing, and transmission. So you've got the methods like encryption, anonymization, and access controls, and then the types of solutions, differential privacy, synthetic data, and then confidential computing. Yep, this guy here, you got to talk to him at the end about confidential computing. And because, I'm a huge fan of NIST, I'm sure many people here are familiar with the security triad of confidentiality, availability, and integrity, but you may not be aware that NIST has also defined privacy engineering objectives, which are a great way to think about privacy. You got predictability, manageability, and this one's a mouthful, it's disassociability, and that's really the privacy objective that we're talking about here when we're talking about privacy-enhancing technologies. So enabling the processing of PII or events without association to individuals or devices beyond the operational requirements of the system. So you see, we've got our pets a little bit in disguise here. And we're going to talk about some of the techniques that you can use to achieve disassociability. And related, another thing to go back and take a look at for NIST, if you're not familiar with the privacy engineering program and the NIST privacy framework. How many have read the cybersecurity framework? How many people know of the NIST privacy framework? All right, so probably less folks there, but for those who don't know anything about the privacy framework, it's the same format and structure as the cybersecurity framework. You've got 5 functions. It's called identify, govern, control, communicate, and then protect. So you've got a lot of shared objectives in privacy and cybersecurity, but within the control function, you have a whole category called disassociated processing, and it's got 5 subcategories that talk about all the outcomes that are directly linked to what privacy and enhancing technologies are intended to do.
So there are many types of privacy-enhancing technologies, but we only had 25 minutes today, so we had to kind of limit the scope of what we want to talk about. So today we are talking about zero-knowledge proofs, secure element, and homomorphic encryption. Those are the 3 that we're going to focus on today just because of the time constraints. And these are also, I feel, the most relevant to digital identity implementations. So first off, you have zero-knowledge proofs. Everybody here have some knowledge, some idea of what zero-knowledge proofs are? So basically, this is, instead of showing a full value, instead of showing your address, your date of birth, your driver's license number, it'll say over 21, over 18, or lives in a certain town. Instead of showing your driver's license number, it'll say that, yes, this person has the ability, is authorized to operate a motor vehicle. It's a very good way of displaying identity information, and instead of giving relying parties access to complete identity information, it limits it to just the value. Zero-knowledge proofs can also support risk mitigation, as relying parties won't be storing sensitive data attributes, risking reduce the confidentiality and misuse of different types of information. Now I'm going to talk about 2 specific digital identity technologies that are taking use of aspects of zero-knowledge proofs. I know people will argue with me if I say that they typically do zero-knowledge proofs completely. So does anybody remember Toonces, the driving cat from Saturday Night Live back in the 80s and 90s? So we had to pull Toonces out of retirement for the mobile driver's license. So basically, MDL is the 18013-5 credential, basically enables a type of zero-knowledge proof. I've gotten into certain arguments with folks. I see people furrowing their brow already in the room, saying that it's not truly a zero-knowledge proof, but basically it does enable data minimization. You do yes/no identity assertions. Again, the bar, the buying age-restricted products, they'll say over 18, over 21. That is something that is baked into the mobile driver's license spec as it stands now. Additional functionality could be added, such as jurisdiction, town, that aspect of things. Some of the challenges with mobile driver's license at this point appropriate use and data governance. Like, how do we restrict the bar from demand? Like, how do we restrict the bar from asking for more information than it should? This has become a larger issue as mobile driver's licenses have gotten rolled out a little bit more, that we don't want to have individuals show their identity all the time. We don't want to have to, roll up to, well, this isn't a good example because we had to show our identity to get our badges here.
Well, I mean, I think it kind of relates back to data minimization, either where it's paper or digital. I think we all don't want to live in a world where we have to tell everybody who we are, only for the use cases where it's absolutely necessary. So it's always imperative. It's an imperative for us to think about where do we actually need to have strong identity, because we don't want to create a world where everything is tracked and profiled. So I think that's an important consideration as well.
And the next one, of course, is verifiable credentials. I put these very mean-looking cats on there because if you talk to people who are in the verifiable credential space, they're very passionate about it, and I admire the passion. But depending on, especially if you talk about mobile driver's license and verifiable credentials hand in hand, you're going to get some differing opinions on which technology you should be using. But again, verifiable credentials can enable aspects of zero knowledge proofs. Again, does the yes/no, gives an attribute value instead of the full value. Again, I think people know that, attributes are verified against information stored on a blockchain, data minimization, and again, but the same challenges that exist for mobile driver's license, in my mind, exist for verifiable credentials and governance and appropriate use. Was there a question?
Did you have a question, John?
Apologizing for the picking of a nit. A VC doesn't, there's a registry, which is awful, but doesn't have to be a blockchain.
Yeah. That is very true. It can be a blockchain. You can also use a traditional database as well.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. One, before we go on to the next pet of the day, zero knowledge proofs could also be useful in other contexts, like even just thinking about, like as we're thinking about summer season for camp, if you're a parent and you have to provide all these records to the camp, like medical records, immunization records, wouldn't it be great if you could just have an assertion sent that, yes, my child has all the appropriate vaccinations. For school registration, I remember enrolling in a new school district I'm in. I moved from DC to Arlington, Virginia during the pandemic, and I had to show proof of residency, and they list all kind of the available documents that you can provide, and one is like a pay stub. And so I'm a privacy pro, so I'm happy to provide the evidence, but I certainly redact all the information that they don't need to know how much I make. They just need to know that I live within the school district jurisdiction. So I think there are a lot of privacy preserving benefits both to individuals, but think about the school district that has to hold on to those records. That creates a lot of risk for them too. So imagine a world where we can just say, yes, this person lives here. Yes, the child is of the right age to enroll in the school and such. So.
Yeah, I'm the nerd who tried to talk to the superintendent of my school district saying, why are you guys requesting all this different information? And what are you're keeping this locked in some file cabinet somewhere, just waiting for somebody to roll up against it and take it and do who knows what with it. But again, that's just me being a bit of an identity nerd. So next, we're moving on to the secure element. So this is actually, secure elements, one term, trusted execution environment, secure enclave. These are all different terms for a similar technology. Basically, it's a trusted data store in a computer, laptop, or mobile device. And so that's where PII, personal data, personal information is secured and stored. So think about your iPhone. You use Face ID to open up. All of that biometric information is stored on a secure element. Also think about passkeys, the passwordless authenticators. Those also stored on a secure element and on your mobile device or on your computer. These are just two technologies, but basically it isolates the information so that it can't be accessed unless authorized to do so.
And just to link it back to that cool NIST privacy framework, that disassociated processing category, there's an outcome specifically that's about, data are processed on local devices. So that, can reduce privacy risk for the individual, but also to the organization.
And next, we have homomorphic encryption. This basically enables encrypted data to be queried and searched without decrypting it. basically reduces the potential of a data exposure or leak, enables, again, large data sets to be searched without having to do it. So like if you're looking for how many customers live in Florida, you'll be able to find out some high level information without having to unencrypt that data. Challenge with it is that it's slow and requires large amounts of computing power. And I believe there's still some standards being worked out around homomorphic encryption as well.
Right, and there's a great use case, and so the national strategy that is linked to in the slides, which are going to be available after Identiverse, has a good case study on how homomorphic encryption was used. I cannot recall the state, but they wanted to study wage data to study gender gap, the gender gap in wages. But individuals or organizations did not want to provide identifiable information, and so they used homomorphic encryption in order to query the data sets without revealing individuals. So it's like you want to make beneficial uses of the data, but still preserve privacy, and so they were able to accomplish through that.
And with that, we're going to have some links to some additional privacy-enhancing technology resources. Again, the slides will be made available after the conference. And with that, we'll take some questions.
Can you explain how homomorphic encryption works? Like, in my mind, like, okay, if something's encrypted, then how do they use that data? It's magic.
It's magic.
Tell me that.
We'll let him answer.
It's some very clever mathematics to do generally with lattices, which is well beyond anything I've ever understood.
I'm kind of the same boat.
Yeah.
Like I can talk about it, but if you actually want me to get into the math, I'm going to be as bad.
Yeah, but I will say, can you flip back to the resources slide? One resource to go look to kind of deconstruct how these things work is the Privacy Engineering Program has a blog series. And so they do a really good job of explaining some of these concepts, like differential privacy. There's a really good blog about that. So the Privacy Engineering Program at NIST, they hire guest researchers from universities to try to demystify some of these techniques. So you can visit, and this is also linked, and get a whole blog series. They have a privacy enhancing crypto project that you can look at as well to explain those. Go ahead.
Well, the way it was explained to me, you can run a mathematical operation against a data set, and you get similar or close results without having to see the underlying data. So you can write a query that says, please pop out the identities of all the people who are up for renewal on a subscription service or something like that, and you'll get a result with homomorphic encryption that doesn't reveal anything else in the data set, but gives you enough information to send that message to those users. Anything that you can run a query against a data set, if you can turn the query into something that be like that, then you can get results out without getting access to the data set.
Sorry, Francis, next. We'll get you next.
So I know my question is a little self-serving, but since multi-party computation has actually been deployed at scale for one-to-one and one-to-many, I was wondering if maybe you could explain that approach.
I cannot.
Please.
Go ahead.
So another technology that we deploy is leveraging something called multi-party computation, which is it's essentially sharding elements and distributing them over a multi-party, exactly what it sounds like, a multi-party cloud environment. And that's another way, another technique that does work for a variety of different functions, not just biometrics and identity, but it's also been deployed for machine-to-machine and other kinds of use cases. So just another example of something that has been also called out in the White House strategy.
Yeah, it's another privacy enhancing technology, one that I did not decide to include in the presentation just because I was like, where are the identity use cases? And I forgot about you all, what you guys are doing, so that does actually make sense. Well, I forgot about, like, when I was doing the research, putting together the presentation, multi-party computation came up, but I didn't necessarily see the direct identity application for it, but then I forgot what you all are doing at Anonybit, so.
So our deployments are one-to-many to detect duplicates, synthetics, block lists, one-to-one biometric matching, and also leveraging this approach for storage, almost like the use cases we're talking about with gender information. So there's like you could use this approach in data vaulting, raw images or passkeys or tokens or other kinds of things, and then recall it. But because it's not on the blockchain, you can delete and comply with all of the privacy regulations.
Yep.
Yeah, so I promise it's more of a question than a comment. I like more conference questions. The frameworks that are being put together by NIST, et cetera, are all great, but since you work for a law firm, though you're not the lawyers, maybe you can give some real short answers on what do you see as the actual legislative situation, both state and federal level in the US and in other countries and regions, in actually forcing the adoption of some of the PET.
So I've got a lot of different thoughts on that. So I mean, we know that there's no comprehensive privacy legislation in the U.S. There's the American Privacy Rights Act that's in committee right now. I think the likelihood of that passing is small. Yeah, you're probably closer to right. With states, there are about 20 states now that have privacy legislation. Some of them give recognition for anonymized data, so I think there's a linkage there. So if you process data leveraging pets, you might be able to sort of avoid, you can comply with some of the requirements because they may not apply to you. Go ahead.
Well, there was also federal legislation proposed recently that would advocate the use of privacy-enhancing
Yes.
technologies. But the odds are, it's not looking good. So I'll just say that.
There's lots of discussions with regulators and standards bodies about how you can apply the different technologies. And it's not just for identity across so many things. So for instance, you could say that if you apply some PETs to GDPR use cases, you can knock off a whole bunch of things you might otherwise need to do. And I'm part of the Confidential Computing Consortium, and we're working, for instance, with the Cloud Security Alliance to work on what measures are appropriate if you employ these technologies. And the same goes for other PETs, I'm aware as well.
So maybe a follow-up then. It feels like these technologies are essentially tools for companies who think ahead and entities, that think ahead and say, how do we do data minimization to limit our liability, limit our exposure, etc. That's the best hope for us to get these adopted.
Yeah.
Opposed to any legislative framework or anything else.
Well, we might see some legislation at some point. I have a feeling, like, I don't know, purely my opinion, at some point we're going to see some sort of national privacy law. What that's going to look like, how that's going to come about, is who knows. But at some point it's going to happen, I think.
Right. I mean, obviously there are different drivers. When you've got the hammer is definitely a driver to move to more privacy-preserving techniques. But I think companies that really want to future-proof their products and services, can kind of apply a framework like NIST and how are we going to get to these outcomes. So then in the event the legislation does pass, you're better prepared. But also I think you're helping to protect individuals. You might be helping to build your brand or reputation and increase consumer trust in absence of any requirement.
So you put these two things, homomorphic encryption and ZKs on this, and are these can be very expensive? Are these the best, or just the first that were identified?
Again, when I was going, I wanted to detect the pets that were most appropriate, most connected to digital identity and identification technologies. Zero knowledge proofs, again, are rolled out in some way, shape, or form with mobile driver's license and verifiable credentials right now. I think they're great when it comes to data minimization. Are they ultimately the best? Time will tell. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I don't think I could speak to cost. Maybe Francis can talk about some of the costs with these solutions, but I think zero knowledge proofs are probably going to be the most impactful initially, in my opinion, when it comes to digital identity.
But there's just to your point earlier as well, there's the the hurdle we also have to overcome is the fact that companies still want the fire hose of information. They still want all the data. And until we convince them to not say they want all the data, we're going to be struggling to kind of implement these technologies.
But that would have been my point. Your best privacy enhancing technology is culture change. Instead of, and if you get to an organization with personal data and you say the question you ask is not how long can I keep it, but how soon can I get rid of it, then you're in the right place.
We're at time. We'll be in the back if you all need anything, but stick
Yeah.
around for John's presentation next on
Thank you.
adding to it.